Brian Rothenberg is an Ohio native and senior communications professional with over 35 years of experience in strategic plan and crisis communications. Prior to his current position as a partner with Triumph Communications, Brian was senior communications advisor and director of public relations for the UAW International Union. He has worked as press secretary for the mayor of Cleveland, communications director of the Ohio Senate Democratic Caucus and the Ohio Democratic Party, and for numerous elected officials in Ohio. In 2006, Brian founded Progress Ohio, then the second of the National Progress Now affiliates. In that capacity, he grew membership to over 400,000 active members, served as a spokesperson for the progressive movement and labor, including weekly TV debates and regular news coverage. Under his leadership, Progress Ohio became the largest state-based progressive membership group in the country. So I'll hand it over to Brian and he can get started. Do you need to put something up on that?
No, I think I'm good, but you guys got handouts, right?
Yeah, well, this is what our handout looks like.
Oh, okay. Oh, okay. I should have brought some. I thought you guys were making.
We added the links that you want.
Oh, the links?
Yeah.
Good. All right. Well, thank you, and I apologize. I did have 6:30, so for those of you who waited, I really appreciate you waiting for me, and I apologize again for being late. How many were here last time I spoke? Any? A few people? Oh, we got a lot of new folks. Good.
We're so good.
Well, that's always good. See if I live up to the billing. Well, we got a couple weeks to go, don't we? And one way or another, the agenda is not going to change of the far right. It's just not. We all know what's going on in terms of the discussion in this country. And I know that we here get frustrated with what we see and how it's progressing in this campaign. And increasingly we're in a country where people don't understand where people are coming from on the other side. What I will say, if you're a student of history, is that we're kind of entering into a new era of media. And by that, it's partially because of social media. So what's happened now is, as television has gotten rid of the old standards that Reagan got rid of, where you had to be fair and balanced on everything, as we've kind of gotten more into first cable television, where, certain people watch MSNBC, certain people watch Fox. Although I have to tell you a little secret, since I do a lot of advertising and I purchase advertising, I'm able to track sometimes where members watch the media. Guess what a lot of liberals wind up doing? They watch Fox TV. They really do watch Fox News. It amazes you, but you can see it when you're tracking it on digital. I think because we all want to see what the other side is saying and get upset or scream at the TV, but we do. So be aware of that. But even that is like old now. So the new world that we're getting into, and it's going to get into what Project 2025 is leading to, the new world we're leading into with technology is that we're all defined in marketing databases. So especially post-COVID, when everybody had to put their emails into databases for groceries and everything else, we can tell who's interested in what groceries you buy, what types of magazines you read, if you even read magazines, where you go online, Fox News, what you're reading, what your age is, how many kids you have. It's amazing the data that's available in souped up marketing. So any of you ever look for a car, even if you're not sure you want it, and you go onto a website and you look for that car, and then the next thing you know, you're getting advertisements from Buick or whatever constantly? It tracked you. It tracked you, it goes into your folder, it tells you who you are, what your interests are, and it's tracking you. So what does that mean in terms of how information is going to start being disseminated. What it means is that you're only seeing what people want you to see that are like-minded. So, and it's going to get even more pronounced. In another 4 to 5 years with app-based TV as opposed to regular broadcast TV, you'll be watching the Guardians playoff game. Your neighbor will be watching the Guardians playoff game. And you're going to see totally different ads based on your age, your demographics, where you've shopped before, where your information is. Same program. Even your kids could be watching the same thing. But depending on who signed up for that app on their email, different ads. Completely different. You walk in a store, there's a Trillium tag, picks you up, it's like a little piece of pixie dust, finds your phone, you go home, everybody in that household now can be targeted by my dad. My dad's 91. He loves the Container Store because he's crazy organized. Like he was the kind that, those old things where you had to like type away and put labels on everything. Yeah, he used to put a label on everything when we were kids. We used to mess with him and move him around. But he likes to go to the Container Store if I visit him down in Boca, which is where all Cleveland Jews go. Columbus people, they go to Naples. Cleveland Jews, they go to Boca. Before they come back. But the point of that is, we would go in there and we'd walk out, and I'd say to my dad, he's 91, he's not on, a lot of apps and stuff like that. But I'd say to him, I'm like, now pay attention, you're going to get ads from the Container Store. And sure enough, the next couple of days, even with what little technology he uses at his age, he started seeing Container Store ads because it picked up where he was. So, is it any wonder right now why we're so polarized? Now I'm going to tell you one other thing before we start getting into Project 2025. And that is, yes, we're not only polarized, we not only see the same things that people want us to see, but we're in a state where you have a vast number of independents, and you're in a state that if you want to win, say Sherrod Brown, you have to have people that will split a ticket. Imagine how hard that is when you're only seeing information from one side or the other on a regular basis. Now, I will say this about Sherrod. I'm not into predictions. I think he's run a great campaign so far. We'll see where a lot of money's coming in. We'll see what happens with it. But I will tell you one observation I've had, which is he has consistently been 6 or 7 points better with people that vote for Trump. That means right now, 6 to 7% of the people voting for Sherrod Brown are ticket splitters. The issue that he's battling is if Trump wins by 12%, he's got to get that number even up higher. Right? But politics is about numbers. So the other thing I'm going to tell you about, and then we're going to get into Project 2025, is that numbers, it's a real simple prospect. You don't think about it as a math prospect when you're talking about politics. But it's all math, right? Any bill needs numbers. Anybody elected needs numbers. Electoral college, you need numbers. If you're not registered, and you register to vote and you vote Democrat, that's +1. Or you register to vote and you vote Republican, that's +1. But if you're a Republican voter for Trump and you vote for Sherrod Brown, that takes not only takes one vote away from the Republican column, it adds one to the Democratic column. That's +2. So when they say we're a state that is heavily red now, we aren't. At most, we're 6.5 to 7% toward Trump. In the Trump world, we have no idea what the Republican Party is going to become after this, right? But that means you only need 3.5% to flip, because it's 2 points, right? So so many people wondered in 2016, how did this happen? No one saw it coming. Everybody thought Hillary was going to win. How did this happen in swing states? What happened there? Well, think about the plus two model. He took blue collar, mostly non-union, by the way. They make a big deal out of unions, but he took blue collar voters, and you took one away from the Democrats, and you added one to the Republicans. That was plus two. It was a very economical way to do it. Did I confuse anyone with that? Totally? All right. You're in a local race, all right? It's 1,001 to 1,000. That's how the race is. It's the 1 point difference, right? You go to your opponent and you get that one vote that was at the 1,001. It's now 1,000, right? But the other guy's now 1,001. That's a difference of 2. When you think about it, it doubles it up. Versus if you're just a new voter, it's just plus 1, right? Or if you're a voter that decides not to vote, it's minus 1. All right? Math. That's all it is. All right, let's talk about this dastardly stuff of Project 2025. I mean, my friends in the media, nationally and locally, love to talk about Project 2025, and they always have to say, Donald Trump doesn't support this. He's made it very clear he doesn't support it. Well, let's go through what's in it, and then let's decide what he will or will not support from it. But he's not saying he doesn't support all the pieces of Project 2025. And what it is 50 of the most conservative right-wing folks in our country that got together at the Heritage Foundation that worked on a proposal to do 3 things. 1, put together an agenda, a policy agenda for what they want. 2, to be able to help the new administration, if it's Republican, staff the infrastructure in Washington, D.C. with conservatives and arch conservatives that believe in these tenets. And 3, their goal ultimately is to make sure that they put their folks in places that can't be removed from through appointments. They're gathering resumes on top of these proposals. But what we're going to talk about is proposals, and one of their proposals, which you see playing out right now, is the issue of transgender Ohioans and transgender whatever state they are. Now, I don't know if this is airing here. I haven't seen it here, but I was up. My niece is somehow has athletic talent. We haven't figured out how, but she's in cross country, and I was up there for her meet, and I was watching in the Cleveland area where I'm originally from television commercials, and 4 commercials in a row came on talking about transgender Ohioans. There was one against Amelia Sykes, who's running for Congress up there. There were 2 against Sherrod Brown talking about transgender issues. And then there was the 4th was actually Vice President Harris, I believe, when she was actually Attorney General in California, and she was either in front of HRC or Equality Ohio talking about the issue, the legal issues involved in it. Why? Well, it goes back to the same group of folks that came up with a proposal that polled well in Virginia, and that is how the Republicans, who have not had very much success lately in Virginia, got the governor's office using this transgender issue. The reality, my understanding is there were 4 transgender athletes in the entire state of Ohio. The OHSAA had rules that govern how they deal with it. 4. Most people that have an opinion about this have never met anyone transgender. There have been no underage surgeries in Ohio. The governor, Mike DeWine, said that about a year ago. So why is this the dominant issue of the day? Because they know that certain segments of the population are driven by it from polling, And they know, just like we do, that you, in order to win nationally, but also in Ohio with Sherrod, you have to pick off certain pieces of moderates or Democrats to keep them from moving over and back to him, especially given his base of working family blue-collar voters. They've literally created an issue. Now, Project 2025 is just, I'm going to read through some of the things that are in it. I gave you a list of it, which I got from one of the memes that were out there, but I checked them and they were accurate. So we're just going to read through the laundry list of crazy stuff. And then some of it, I'm sure Trump has distanced himself from. Ending no-fault divorce. Now, they're claiming that they have gone away from ending no-fault divorce, but it is in the actual document. I've read the document. A complete ban on abortions without exception. Banning contraceptives. Tax breaks for corporations in the 1%. Higher taxes for working Americans. Elimination of unions and worker protections. Basically getting rid of the NLRB, which protects unions. Now, just so you know, coming from a union where I was a spokesperson, the NLRB is not the most effective agency at all. There was a guy that Elon Musk fired from the Tesla plant for trying to organize a union. It's still in the courts almost 9 years later. But they want to eliminate it altogether. It's not just those protections, it's worker safety protections. During the first Trump administration, one of the things that they did when it came to worker protections is they only required companies, for the first time ever, to keep records on safety inside their plants for 6 months. Now, why would they do that? Well, if someone gets injured and there's a history of knowing about a problem in your plant, it's not going to work well for you in court. So they literally tried to strip some of those protections from workers. And let me tell you something, by the way. I work for a union that had manufacturing workers. There were some horrific accidents that happened. They're not all fatalities, but even the fatalities were unbelievably horrific that happen every day. I think last year there were 132 deaths in manufacturing facilities, and that's with our protections. Can you imagine what it would be like if they had none? They want to raise the retirement age. They also want to either cut Social Security or talk about privatizing Social Security. Now, what does that mean? Many of you know about raising the cap. Who knows about raising the cap on Social Security? So literally, you pay Social Security until a certain level of income, and then you stop paying into it because it's capped. If they lifted the cap, even if they didn't lift it for everybody, if they just raised it for wealthier people to continue paying, you would have a solvent Social Security system for decades. It's that simple to solve the Social Security problem, but they won't do it. They will not lift the cap. Why? Republicans call that a tax increase on wealthy people. It really doesn't make any sense. I think the cap right now, it had been, I think isn't 147 or something like that? So after you make $147,000, you don't pay into the Social Security system. You lift the cap to $300,000 even, and you're in good shape. Or you lift it on people that make a certain amount of money. It's solvent. They want cuts to Medicare, and they want to eliminate some of the pharmaceutical limits that we put on in recent years. They want to end the Affordable Care Act by splicing it up and dicing it up and getting us into more privatized health care, when in fact the real problem with that system right now is that when you start cutting younger people off of the requirements when they're healthier, which is what happened after Obamacare was originally passed, it raises the cost, because the older you are, the more cost you have on healthcare. And I know that personally because I am now 58 years old, and where I might have had 1 or 2 pills when I was in my 30s or 40s, I spend Sunday every half hour on a Sunday, which most of you do, putting all my pills into little pockets so that I don't forget anything, right? They want to eliminate the Department of Education, and of course continue vouchers and what we've already got. I heard you talking also about the problems that you're having with the religious education exemption that Westerville went through. They want to encourage and spread that farther. It's funny, they say they don't want to be in the classroom. They seem to be, the Libertarian Party is now the big government party where they want to tell you what you can teach, what you can think, where you can go, and what you can do. But we'll get into freedom issues shortly. They want to end free and discounted school lunch programs because, why would we want to feed kids, right? There is an attack going on DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion programs. And what they don't seem to realize is how embedded that is in the culture of many companies. But it's working. I can tell you how it's working. I got a call from HRC 2 or 3 months ago. Ford, because their big product is the F-150, was afraid that what happened to Bud Light would happen to them. So what did they do? They discontinued all DEI programs. They no longer pay into the HRC Victory Fund. They no longer have DEI programs. They say they have plant by plant. They have civil rights committees that they put together that are voluntary committees. I think because the union is involved, we also had standing committees that dealt with many of those issues. But let me tell you about some of the things that can happen in a plant. We had nooses during my 8 years working for the union in plants. We had people that were sexually harassed in a horrible way in plants. We had people that were gay and basically abused in the plants. Now, I'm not proud of that, my brothers and sisters that did that action. But because we had DEI, because we also had programs within the UAW, we dealt with them. Can you imagine what will happen if you don't have to deal with them? Banning books and curriculum, not only about slavery, but about being gay, about many other things. Now, this is already happening with a lot of our libraries. Any librarians out there? So, I'm sure you've had people march in and sort of insist that certain books not be covered. Some of them are ridiculous. At one point, they wanted the Martin Luther King speech actually eliminated, the famous "I Have a Dream" speech. Ending climate protections. They just don't believe in that. They want to end. So here, I was always a skeptic when it came to electric vehicles because the technology isn't there yet. The batteries don't last a long time. It takes too long to charge. It's going to take a while for the American public to be able to adjust to that. But that said, if you're not going in that direction, if you're not subsidizing that, the rest of the world, especially the Chinese, are moving in that direction and heavily subsidizing the cars to the point that they're so cheap that it's threatening the American auto industry. Not just the unionized American auto industry, all unionized American auto workers. What has been proposed are tariffs, and I know that Donald Trump has actually agreed with those tariffs on China. But the problem there is that the USMCA does allow for free movement of product between Mexico and Canada. So what you're seeing, for instance, after the record contracts that the UAW got is, out of spite in some ways, they're moving some of their products up to Canada. or over to Mexico. And you're going to see that increasingly happen under USMCA. They want to increase Arctic drilling, deregulate big business in the oil industry, which is just going to cause more and more havoc with us. They want to expedite capital punishment. Now, this one I find kind of interesting because they have sort of this very heavily religious-based background, and many religions don't believe in that, but apparently that doesn't apply when it comes to Project 2025. The 5 gentlemen in New York City should be put to death, and later was proven they were innocent. So let's hope he's not the final judge and jury anymore. Condemn single mothers by promoting traditional families. Defund the FBI and Homeland Security, because why would we want to protect ourselves that way? I'm hoping on Homeland Security he's changed his mind a little bit because of the need for more funding for the Secret Service. He's been very clear about using the military to break up domestic protests, something the military has made very clear they didn't think was their role. Obviously, this Project 2025 talks about mass deportation of immigrants and incarceration. It will end birthright citizenship, ban Muslims from entering the country, eliminate federal agencies including the FDA, EPA, and more. And he wants to pack courts with right-wing judges. Now, of all of these things that we talked about, there are a few things that maybe he'll differ on, that he can point to. He can differ and say, on the Ukraine, they actually want to continue the war. Project 2025 talks about that. He obviously is very anxious to solve it in a day. I don't know how he's going to do that, but it may be like he built his wall. He probably would not be for ending no-fault divorce because he's had many experiences with divorce. He's made it very clear when it comes to abortion, he thinks it's up to the states, unless he's pushed too far from the right, like he was in Florida, when he suddenly becomes opposed to it. And he tends to bend things anyways toward his own whim when he does these things. But he has his own plan and his own agenda, which he has a name for, and I've put it in your links to paperwork. But he has a proposal to reshape America called Agenda 47. And Agenda 47 contains probably 80% of these proposals. Now, why is this important even if Kamala Harris wins and everything goes our way and we at least keep the House, maybe we keep the Senate, but we at least keep the House or take over the House? Why is this all important? It's important because these issues aren't going away. It's important because what we think today is a safe thing is not always safe. No one ever thought that Americans would march on our U.S. Capitol. In fact, when I was a kid, before they even had security around the Capitol, you could walk in the Capitol. Some of you know this. If you visited when you were younger, you could walk in, you could go down and take the trains, you could mingle with senators on those little trains underneath that go between the House and Senate office. I met John Glenn that way. My parents took us down there, and we met him because he was walking through, and he took us up to see the Senate. That could never happen today, and yet our U.S. Capitol was stormed. Our U.S. Capitol was stormed. But we can't do it as progressives alone. Now, there are natural ways that we can get along with people on different issues. And some of you know, if you were active when Progress Ohio was still around and active before I left, we even worked with the Tea Party when it came to suing over Jobs Ohio and other things. We reached across the aisle. We had to reach across the aisle on different issues, on escalation of the Iraq War. And the reason I'm saying that to you is because all of these issues are going to take a broad consensus or a broad effort to work with each other. And things can be twisted. Things can be very twisted. For instance, how many of you ever thought about transgender issues before this last year and a half? Anyone? Okay, a couple people? Yeah. But for the vast majority of Americans, some of them didn't even know what transgender was. Right? Suddenly, you're in fear. We have had 124 years, I think, in this state, or 224 years, where teachers managed somehow to give hall passes for people to go to the right bathroom at the right time. But we need Congress and state legislators now to tell our teachers who can go into what bathroom. We got a lot of problems. I don't think going to the bathroom, well, I did see the story about one school not too long ago having too long lines in the bathrooms. But I don't think that's a major issue. But they have somehow convinced the electorate it is. Public education. Why are we suddenly pushing religious education and pushing charter schools and defunding it? Well, most of us know if you follow the money, you're seeing people making money off of those charter schools. Most of us also know that what they're trying to do is subsidize the cost of education so that people can be more divided and just fit into their own school and study their own way and think their own way. And they couch this as they're freeing people, when in actuality what they're doing is they're putting people into smaller and smaller pens. And that requires us to think differently about how we approach our communities. And differently about how we approach getting other people involved in what we're doing. Right? Most Americans do not think it is right to bully people based on their race, their religion, whether they're gay or straight. They don't. But we have to appeal to that. And we have to go straight to folks and talk about that. And in my opinion, we have to be more frank about it. There were 4 athletes in the state of Ohio. 4. And I guarantee you, none were like 8 feet tall, like, in that commercial, which is unbelievable. But, there were 4 kids. 4. In the meantime, transgender kids' suicide rates have gone up 30% since all this happened. 30%. Kids trying to take their own lives. And we have a story to tell. But you can't do it in such a vitriolic way where you're looking at the other side and you're telling the other side how wrong they are. Right? You have to go about it from a logical perspective. And what I've always told folks dealing with Project 2025 is if we attack it the same way they're attacking us, then you're going to lose that vast middle and you're not going to get people to see common sense. And I carry that in even when I'm doing, things like, I think I have Mike Ganadakis on Friday on that WOSU show. But, I remember not too long ago I was doing a show with him and they were talking about marijuana and legalizing marijuana, which I've never used. It doesn't do anything for me. But he was like railing about, I don't want marijuana around kids in parks and I don't want marijuana around, kids in schools. And I just turned to him and I'm like, but you're okay with guns in parks and guns in schools? I mean, what's the difference? But that's common sense, right? And when you have common sense on your side, you can build consensus. And hopefully if issue 1 passes, we're going to have, now everybody thinks issue 1 is going to change the state. It's going to be hard work. I was in Michigan when it passed. It took 2 cycles for the legislature to even up. But if anyone's followed what's happened in Michigan, it's actually 50-50 in the House and the Senate. You have a fair shot to win these races, but you're not going to have the slam dunk races we have right now for Minority Leader Russo here. It's going to be tighter, right? It's going to mean we're going to have to work harder. But the fruits of working harder is that means we build a broader consensus about issues that make sense. And when you do that, you can win majorities. And when we win a majority, we can get rid of some of the silliness that goes on. The other thing we have to do, which young people, frankly, it's going to be interesting to see as they grow up, is deal with diversity. You know, the reality of it is that other than certain communities, we are not as diverse as people would like us to be. Now, I will say this about Central Ohio. It is much more diverse than Cleveland, where I grew up, or Detroit, when I was up in Michigan. I mean, there are whole communities that are just set one way or another, and they're starting to change. But we have got to embrace the fact that people are different, that we have disagreements. We can't fear each other. We live in a country of fear. I have a relative that won't put a yard sign in their front yard for Harris Waltz because they're afraid. I have talked to Jewish people about holding a fundraiser in this town who are afraid they're going to get picketed by people that would be picketed by others. We have become, because of our technology, divided. And what I want to get across to everybody as we look at Project 2025 is that whether Harris wins or not, this is coming. People are going to push these issues. But what we need to do, we need to be thoughtful, hear other people, dismiss the rabid guy, the crazy uncle, whatever that's not going to be there. But we've got to find a way to talk to people and talk to each other. Because if progressives are going to win, we have to build. And we have to build it not so that everybody thinks the same as us, which I don't even think everybody in this room that's a progressive thinks the same way. But we can find commonalities, and we can build a better world. And we could be more inclusive and less divisive without falling into the trap of being divisive. What this plan will do is divide us even more. And what they will do is find one issue, just one, where a person could disagree with 90% of this. It could be like my great uncle, lawyer up in Cleveland, who divorced 8 times. One of them was a Grover Cleveland. He divorced, then he married someone else, then he married her again. Betty the first and Betty the second. They're going to try to get a guy like that to be against no-fault divorce. You know? And we can't let one issue, like transgender issues, dictate that. We can't let our differences divide us. And we can't make people afraid of us. Because the other side has people afraid of us. It is an us versus them world, even if it's on one issue. You know? If I were still in charge of a progressive organization, instead of just being a consultant and a pundit, I would reach out to someone who is pro-life and say to them, you know what, I don't agree with you on that issue. But I understand where you are on life, and I happen to be, it's always been my belief that I'm against capital punishment. And I think we can find commonality on that, maybe. You would think, if they're for life, but that doesn't actually translate all the time. And it gives courage to politicians to be more courageous about it. Because we are reaching out, and we are part of that, as opposed to sinking into the divisiveness of where we are. The danger of Project 2025 is that it's an all or nothing thing. That we fall into the same trap. That anybody that's for things in 2025 is against us. Because that's where they're going to try to find one issue. Yes, sir. We're ready for questions anyways. And then you got to let me know when I'm going too long, because I love taking.
I read the document, and you're listing individual pieces.
Right.
I read things from the overall strategic objective.
Right.
You didn't mention the unitary executive. This is about putting all the power of the government
Yes.
in the hands of Donald Trump. Oversight committees, they're out of business. The judiciary is out of business.
Yeah. Special counsels, they want to get rid of special counsels too. That is a major part of their agenda. It is also a major part of Trump's agenda. Now, whether the Congress will go for that, even if it is Republican controlled, I do not know. If he were elected, but it's a daunting thing. It is a scary thing, and many of the liberties we take for granted would be gone. I do wish that we could embolden true conservatives, not Trump conservatives, but true conservatives that have more of a libertarian streak, that believe in let people live, don't dictate the world to us. But yes, we need to be cognizant of that and hope that those protections are remaining in the Constitution. Yes.
When you look at a website, they sort of say which things are, quote, these are not true about 2025.
Sure.
But the thing they're very clear about, and I don't see how you compromise on it, is with the education. They're real clear about getting rid of the Department of Education.
Well, sure.
Right? And they're real clear about that tax money should be okay to be used for private religious education. So how do you find common ground? How do you?
So you can find on anything that somebody says, you can point to one thing and then you drive that wedge. And so the common ground with that person would be on a different issue. Or you appeal to them that there have to be limits. What if I told you, many of you don't know this, but the main opposition leader in Turkey happens to live in Pennsylvania. Okay? He came over here in exile because he was, Turkish president is also religious, by the way. But he came over here because he was essentially, thrown out of the country because he controlled police, he controlled higher education. Do you know what he did when he set up his headquarters in Pennsylvania? He set up charter schools, some of them operating in Ohio. Yeah. I say that at the risk of a fatwa probably, but it's true. So, when you talk to somebody about that doesn't agree with you on a charter school issue or something like that, you can say, look, how is it that this guy who is too radical in a Muslim country can be in exile here, and we're giving him state money to educate our kids? There has to be some kind of limits. And it's public money. There has to be audits. People believe in that. It's public money. There needs to be, reasonable expectations of what happens in those schools, not fraud.
But Brian, one of the things that our legislation did was, especially when it came to vouchers, was they slid it in as a line item, so there is no budgeting. But
Right.
it has to happen. So
Right.
I think that's one of the biggest issues as well.
Right.
Is when we're looking at funding, we have to be well versed on what that means, when it has to be budgeted, and when it doesn't.
Well, and I think that one of the ways to approach somebody that disagrees with you on the issue is to say that, because most conservatives would say, wait a minute, what? There's no line items, there's no way to audit it, there's no way to know how this money, public money, is being spent. You're going to get agreement on that.
And that's what's happened with the vouchers.
Right.
Is, there is no cap.
Right. Correct. I'm going to go to the back because I'm afraid he's had his hand up for a while and I don't, or she has.
I just wanted to mention with regard to what you were just saying, is one of the things you point out, and it's not actually disagreeing on policy exactly, but it's pointing out that that in rural parts of the area, there's no charter schools, there's no there are
Right.
few of those, so there's no capacity, so they need their public schools to function, because very few people can get into any other kind of school because they just don't exist. There's not enough people there to make it worth their while, big profit that they want. So you can kind of partner with some of those people, because some of those people realize that that's damaging to their communities.
And the flaw in the whole proposal, other than it was originally done by a guy named Brennan up in Hudson just to make money, but the flaw in the whole proposal is that public schools can compete with private schools or vouchers when a public school has to take in every student that comes in, regardless of what their background is, regardless of how they've grown, regardless of where they've lived. And you know, I'm Jewish, that's a mitzvah to take in any student and be able to try to make them a success, and there's many success stories that way. But a charter school and a voucher school doesn't need to do that. So you're not really creating the competition that you think you're creating. Now, is it good to create, maybe if you're talking to someone, a competitive environment to do better? I think every teacher I've ever met wants to do better in their education. But that doesn't mean you disparage public schools and public schools go away. You know? Yes, sir.
You touched on this. It won't end if Harris wins. But you also pointed out, that a lot of it is aimed at Trump winning and implementing these. How much in 2025 or 2025 has an agenda that's conscious of what will happen if Trump loses?
I think the Heritage Foundation and the conservative movement in this country is miles ahead of the progressive movement in terms of its planning. And one of the ways I would explain that's going on right now has to do with how they attack Roe v. Wade, and they're attacking the U.S. Supreme Court. So to give you an example, regardless of who's president. So right now, as dissents are written by some of the far-right jurists like Alito, what you will find they are quoting from briefs that are put in by organizations like the Buckeye Institute. They're not law, but because they're being quoted as part of the dissent, they're in the public record. And increasingly, there have been articles about this. The use of amicus briefs to do that and put these radical right issues into dissent briefs. Anybody a lawyer here? Once you do that, you actually put it into the public purview. And then when these things are overturned, like the Exxon case that was overturned, going against regulations of, and what you can regulate, what you can't. When they use that, many of the quotes that were in the new majority opinion got into the ether through the dissents of previous cases. So they've been doing this for a long, long time. That takes time to plan and execute that. But it worked. And it has gradually worked its way into majority opinions now. We have not been doing that. And we need to be smarter as a movement in approaching it. But we also need to not fall in the traps of, being the radical left. Because what we need is to find ways to appeal to people we disagree with. And there are logical ways to do that. Try it at Thanksgiving. When you feel like yelling at that one relative, try to find one thing you agree on and see if it starts to turn. Any other questions? Yes?
I've heard on Rachel MSNBC that there
Well, I do think that they did it in a hurry last time, and they have been much more planned out in terms of how they're approaching this, and I would anticipate that there will be a lot of legal challenges, even if it's not a close race in the state. I think that they've been very clear about it in the key states they need to win. And I think they've done a much better job, I've got to be honest with you, on the Republican side of targeting the Electoral College versus the national vote. And I think that we're doing that now. But I think when you even look at the messaging of Donald Trump right now, and he's a chameleon, he'll say whatever he needs to say, but the border issue is about Arizona and Nevada, right? Fracking, it's about Pennsylvania. The Arab issues and some of those issues are about Michigan, even if it doesn't mean he doesn't want to lose support among conservative Jewish groups and people like the Adelsons. But what he's done is he's gotten people to be, there's a big movement there to not vote for either candidate. So it's -1, right? So they have been very intentional about how they've been doing it. I do think that we have to be better about it. And in Washington, we get wrapped up in these big, broad messages as a left movement, and we have to be more intentional about not falling into traps in how we approach things, and be more strategic about those states. Here in Ohio, I think it's really simple. If we want to win in this state, it's 3.5% to 4% every time. Cordray, you can look at Tim Ryan. If there's money and there's an ability to fight, it's been 7 or 8 points. That means we need to flip 3.5 points from the other side to be able to get there. That is within the margin of error of the poll. It really is. But that's up to us. I coming back, and I heard this in Michigan too. When I went up there, it was all Republican at the time. We have a tendency to point to the party, and I've been to the party 2 or 3 stints they've sent me back. We have a tendency to point to the party and blame the party. The party is us. We don't always agree. There are moderate Democrats, and we don't agree with progressive Democrats, people that are proudly liberal. We don't all agree. But if we want to do something differently, you got to do it yourself. What I love about UAPA is that even before Progress Ohio started, you guys were already organizing about a year or 2 before I even started doing that. And you didn't wait for a party. You didn't wait for money. You didn't wait for other people. At the time, everybody thought Upper Arlington was unwinnable. And look at you now. So I think we need to stop looking for a messiah of a party or a messiah of a public figure. And we got to base this more on and look deep at ourselves of, if we want to be in a majority, how do we talk to people that are on the fence? And how do we talk to people we know don't agree with us? Because I do think common sense is on our side. I really do. And despite what Donald Trump's managed to do with lacking common sense, I think that I could come up on stage and I could take a break and have you play music, and then I don't know if that was dancing or what that was. So yeah, sway. Do we have time for more questions? I think so. I'm here because I came late. I'm here to take whatever you guys have. Any other questions? Any other concerns?
I have one. Did I dream this, or was there some conversation in that Project 2025 about the National Weather Service?
Yes. Yeah, there was a belief in eliminating the National Weather Service. There's a strong belief that weather has been used to manipulate things as part of global warming. So there's been an attack on that. I mean, I think there are more lucid reasons than Marjorie Taylor Greene's, decision that I guess Jewish people control tornadoes and hurricanes. Space lasers, yes. Yes. I got a little buzzer on my desk. I call it my space laser. I am Jewish. It doesn't work.
One
Yes.
of the reasons I heard why they want to eliminate that is because of the technology of being able to know how we get those forecasts that say whether bad weather is coming or whatever. I mean, it's a way to nationalize a standard message coming from.
It is, and to control the message and to control how things are done. And, we are a country right now that is very divisive. We're not seeing it here like we used to. We think we are, but we have yard signs stolen and stuff like that. I mean, some of the people in North Carolina that were with FEMA were chased away by militia folks. We're just a very divided country right now, and it's somewhat disturbing. And I think you're seeing that in some of the reactions of people. But I also think that it's freezing people and scaring them.
Can I ask you, you're in the media business, but before I forget, you might forget Donald Trump's upset at no because he said a hurricane was going to come into this side.
Oh yeah, I forgot about that. Yeah,
He had his own map.
his maps were
In the
wrong.
media business, what is the message that makes a Sherrod Brown a winner in Ohio and Kamala Harris a winner nationally?
So I think that Sherrod has developed a message in Ohio that is good, that focuses, and he's been consistent. He has not lost some of the crossover Trump vote as he's done that. I think he's had to be more strategic about it than past candidates have been. But he's put the focus on working Ohioans. I do think that, we were a little slow to finally, he has an ad out that is debunking this transgender issue as ridiculous and, some of those type of issues. They do use the boogeyman label of being liberal, which I think is unfortunate, because I don't know that he really has been. He's been more of a pragmatic senator. With Kamala Harris, I mean, there's certain built-in advantages and disadvantages of her campaign. I do believe there is some misogyny in this country still. I do believe that there's some racism in this country still, and so those are part of it. Although you have a president that's even somehow saying she's not half black, which I didn't understand.
Would you mention the projects under the Inflation Reduction Act that no one mentions? So the governor and everyone goes and cuts ribbons, but it's all Biden dollars. I was told yesterday there are 50,000 approved projects, and Biden and his team are working to get the money allocated so it can be.
Well, I'll let you in on a little secret in Washington. They started doing that. His initial, press conferences were over Intel. But the thing you need to understand about those commercials is, so Republicans have it both ways. They'll attack you over it on the one hand, and on the other hand, as soon as they can go home and brag about the money in a project, they're there for the ribbon cutting and those type of things. That's been time immemorial that's happened. I do think there's a good record to talk about. I also think we need to talk more about the role of working across the lines with a Republican governor, which is all he's had other than his first couple of years. And there's a lot of good in the state in terms of economic development. I think they were very slow I think both sides, both the Republicans and Democrats, I think Washington was slow to talk about bread and butter issues, like the grocery store that you're now seeing. But I also think that, they shy away from issues. Yes, the border issue is an important issue. I would say the most important border issue in Ohio is actually when Michigan comes down for the Ohio State game that we face. But in all sincerity, if you talk to a farmer, farmers are having a hard time and they're having to pay more and more for farm hands, and it's really impacting our farms. Okay? Why is it impacting our farms? Because they can't get undocumented, they can't get workers that are seasonal workers as easily because we don't have a coherent policy to do that. And because we don't do that, and we don't have a lot of Americans that do that, it's really impacting farms. There was a 60 Minutes thing, anyone see that, about Florida, where they said some Florida farms may even go under, and we'll have to start importing a lot of the oranges and other things that they do because they can't find the workers anymore because of our incoherent policy. I don't think we're talking about that. So if you want to talk about the cost of food, it's impacted by that. It's absolutely impacted by that. But we haven't really connected that in the way that I think we could do better. I'm not criticizing anyone individually. I don't think either party has. But I think if you were to talk to farmers, they're really upset about this problem. So, all right. Am I good, or am I over time, or am I under time, or I'm good? One or two more questions? No one has any questions? Yes, ma'am.
I guess this is a little side issue, but one thing I've come up with in arguing with people for vouchers, I've gone about it by saying, you know what, let's share and share alike. Billionaires are giving billions to private schools, so let's add up all the billions aside from vouchers and all the money you're getting aside from vouchers and divide it up equally to the people of the state, since you think it's fair to divide our money up equally. Let's divide, share and share alike. We're sharing our money, you share yours. And boy, you should see, they think I'm crazy. But it's a huge amount. All those churches that think it's okay to separate church and state when they don't have to pay taxes, but they want your share of the taxes.
Now, but the thing you always have to remember, I probably spent more time in churches on the progressive side than the Republicans because of the amount of churches that we have.
Yeah.
And what they're trying to do is divide us off of those churches.
I'm sorry.
And what they're trying to do is divide us, because we do have people that makes you sound unchristian or unchurch oriented, you know. And that's why I always go back to, when you're thinking about how to address it from the money aspect. If you got public money that's going into anywhere, it's audited. We know that because we see audits, we see people going to jail, we see all kinds of things happening in the state over public money. But if you start giving money to other organizations, how do we know it's going where it needs to go? And even when the Attorney General and Auditor started saying that they were auditing it and putting out all these press releases, and we don't talk about this enough, how much money did they get back? You know? What happens to the assets that we paid for, the chairs, the tables, the desks, if somebody goes out?
The real estate.
Yeah, the real estate.
I bought ECOP too.
Yeah.
That was,
Yeah, the ECOP fiasco, there's the ECOP. Yeah.
No problem.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think if you really want to reach across the people that are either on the fence on it or are conservatives, but they're true conservatives, not sort of, you know, radical MAGA conservatives, and you start to talk to even some MAGA conservatives, and you start to talk to them about, this is public money, this is your tax money. I know you don't want to pay taxes that high. I get that, and I might not agree with you on everything you say. But don't you think your public money should be spent and accounted for?
I think one of the biggest things that we have to keep in mind too is that when you look at the population, the majority of the students go to public schools.
They do.
So that is one thing that I think sometimes gets lost in the shuffle, that it is, the majority of the children in Ohio are public school students.
I think you're right. That is true. That is true. And you know, well, and if you follow it, the attack on, let's just be blunt, and I'm not running for anything, so I can say it. You know, the real root of attacking public education is the fact that there are unions and unionized teachers. The real root, when it comes to attacking public workers, is because they're unionized. The real root of attacking organized labor in general with your laws is because they're unionized. And because politically, when they do come together, who do they give their money to? other than the Teamsters, apparently. But that is the real root of this, is the fact that they don't want opposition. And they're they want the death of public education, some of them. I wouldn't say all of them, but rather than attacking on that basis, because you're not going to win against somebody who's convinced of that, you can at least appeal to them that I don't agree with what Republicans are doing in the state, but I do think my tax money should be accounted for. So, and I'm using that as an example of how you find ways to be able to talk to people that don't agree with you. Is that it? Yes?
It's clear you've had a lifetime of learning how to do what you're doing right here.
Yeah.
Being very calm.
Yes.
I don't know about the rest of y'all, but I get very a little agitated, a little jazzed when I start talking about things I'm passionate about. It's very hard to sort of stay very calm and speak from my head, not from my heart.
Right.
I mean, literally, we need trainings.
Well, I'm happy to do that. There are communication trainings to teach people to do that. I do get upset occasionally. I have an advantage, to be honest with you, which is I have a very weak voice, so if I speak too loudly for too long, it goes hoarse. I probably shouldn't have said that because he's got a camera on, because the next time I'm on TV, they'll try to get me to do that, so I can't say anything. But, and that does help. But you are right. It is hard to not be passionate about issues you care about. But you got to think of the goal of what you're doing when you're talking to a person. And there is, there are a lot of conservatives that I disagree with 90% of the things that they talk about. But I can tell you, like even Rob Walgate, I did many things with when I was at Progress Ohio on issues that I agreed with him. He's more of the traditional Voinovich conservative movement, that did term limits. You just have to learn that, as I have over time, that we're in a divisive world because people want us divided, and there is good in everybody. And there's agreement on something in everybody. And by the way, there's disagreement in this room somewhere that everybody has over something. It's okay. It really is. All right. Well, I'm glad that you all came. I'm glad that 2 sessions happened, and I apologize for being so late. But thank you.